Welcome to Taxonomy Online. Today we want to take the topic quadratic equation. We want to see the various ways by which we can solve a quadratic equation. Let's get started. Okay, by definition, we say that a quadratic equation is any equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So if you have any equation whereby the a is not equal to 0, simply put, we cannot have any equation whereby the x exponent 2 term will be missing. For example, if this is 0, it means that 0 will multiply this to make it what? 0. So it means we will learn only if this becomes 3x plus 1 equals 0. We cannot call this a quadratic equation because there is a missing x squared term. So if this is there, it means I can have x squared where the a can be 1 plus 3 equals 0 as an equation, because in this case our a equals 1 and the b, which is the bx, equals what? 0. So because the b is 0 times x will make the bx column to be 0, but we are having the constant term as c. So any equation of this form is a quadratic equation. This is not. So always the x exponent 2 term must always be present to make the equation certified as what? A quadratic equation. So today we want to see that what are some of the ways by which we can solve an equation under this. We can do it through factorization. We can also do it through graphical method. We can use completing the squares. And when we complete the square of this quadratic equation, we get a formula which can be used also to solve any equation on this form. So today we want to see how we can make x the subject here. Simply put, we want to find the root of this solution if a, b, c are not given real numbers. So let's try and see what we can do with that. Alright, so this is the equation for a quadratic equation. So we have ax squared plus bx plus c. We want to solve this through completing the squares. We want to see how we can be able to make x the subject from this equation. So now the first thing to note is that any equation of this form, if it is given to you, you have to make sure the coefficient of our x squared is what? 1. If it is 2, you have to make sure it is 1 by dividing through by that number. Always make sure it is what? 1. So here we are going to divide through by a in order to make the coefficient here equals 1. So it's going to be ax squared over a, b over a, x plus c over a, all equals to 0 over a, which will also give us what? 0. So now we can see we are having this dividing by this will cancel the a. So directly x squared plus b over ax. We can send this to the other side to have minus c over a. So now the first thing to do is to make sure the coefficient of x squared is what? Unit, that is 1. Good, that's the first thing. Now the second step to follow is that your coefficient of x, you find half the square of that. So I'll say half of b over a. I'll find half of this. And the answer I'll get to be b over 2a. Find half of it, then square the answer that you will get. So imagine this place is supposed to be 4. Half of 4 will be what? 2. The square of 2 will be 4. So after you find half of that coefficient, square it. Add the result to the left and the right. So I'm going to add this to both the left hand side and the right hand side of this equation. So I'll be having x squared b on this plus b over a, 2a all squared equals to minus c on this plus b on 2a all what? Squared. So those are the two simplest method we can take. One, find the x square, each coefficient to be what? 1. Now, 2, you find half the square of the coefficient of x, add it to both the x and that of what? The right. Alright, if you see this, you can see this is having x squared, x, then the constant. X squared, x, and a constant. You can see this is square, the constant is also square. This is from a polynomial. So if I have, let's say, x plus b all squared, by polynomial expansion, we say that we square the first, which is x squared, twice their product. Product of this will be bx. Twice will be 2bx. Square the last, which will be b squared. So you can see that we have x squared, we have x, and we have the last term is the constant also squared. So if we see this, this is the same as this. So you can see that this is already, you see, if you find the square of this, we divide, you see the 2 will cancel. So in this case, if I were to have multiplication of 2, twice their product, 2 will be here. So if 2 multiply b over 2a, it will cancel. So that simply means that the left hand side is nothing but x plus b on 2a all squared by polynomial expansion. This will give result to this. So this is just expanded to get this. So all this equals to minus c on a plus, I think if I square this, I have b squared. If I square this, it will be 2 squared will be 4. A squared will be what? A squared. So this become, let's say it's a fraction we have to deal with. So if I like, I change the position so that the negative will go to the other side. Or I just find the LCM. You know, LCM of a variable is always finding the variable that have the highest power. So a exponent 1, a exponent 2. So 4a squared will be our LCM. When a divide this, if I put a here, it will cancel the square. So I'll be left with 4a. Multiplying this to give me negative 4ac. Then plus 4a squared going here will also give you 1. 1 times the third will still maintain what? The b squared. So you can see that if I simplify this, it will just be b squared as positive minus 4ac all on what? 4a squared. So the whole of this is nothing but this. So I'm just going to replace that with what I have. So here I will still have my x plus b 2a all squared equals to b squared 4ac on what? 4a squared. So this is what I have. 4. Simplification. Now we are having square. We said in the beginning we want to make x the subject, right? So the x must stand on its own. Here it is being added to a constant and squared. I can calculate the square by finding the square root of both sides. So if I find the square root of this and the square root of this, I'll be having x plus b on 2a equals to the square root of my b squared minus 4ac all over what? 4a squared. So that will be the best way by which I can solve this. Finding the square root of both sides will send the square cancelling this. The square root will be on both the numerator and our denominator. So now still our attention is on the x, but not any other term. So what do? We need to make this become isolated. Now before I continue, we know that a set is positive or negative and root of any value. Set we call irrational numbers. So if I have plus or minus n root. So the n can take numbers from 2 and above. So if I put 2 here, it becomes square root of x. Let's say 7. This is irrational. We call it a set. So it's always positive or negative. So right away, we indicate that finding the square root of both sides will give us positive or negative square root of the right hand side. So in that case, if I want to maintain the x, so that I send whatever term I have to the other side, so that is going to be x equals to, this is positive, so we subtract b over 2a from both sides. So if I subtract it from here, it becomes 0. So having minus b over 2a plus or minus, you see that if I find the root of a over b and the indices, this is the same as what? The root of this, also the root of this. Even this can also be under the property of set. But if you are doing this, it means that the numerator will have the square root and the denominator also have what? The square root. So if I find square root of 4a squared, square root of this is 2. The square root of a squared will become what? A. So it means the denominator here is just going to be without the square root. So this is going to be the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Take note, the square root is no more affecting the 2a because it was 4a squared. And when we find the square root of 4a squared, it gives us only 2a. So that is this. So look at it. You can see 2a, 2a. And the fraction, common fraction, the same denominator. So what do? We only compute or operate the numerator and take one of the denominators. So it means that x equals to, if I have this, it's going to be minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared 4ac all over 2a. Since 2a and 2a are just a common denominator, so we only use them as one LCM. So if that is the LCM, 2a will goes into 2a 1, multiplying minus b plus or minus the 2a also goes into this, still 1. So it multiply your numerator to give you this. So now we have succeeded in making x the subject. We are asked to make x the subject. Simply put, we are finding a root of this quadratic equation. And this is what we have been calling almighty formula. The formula for solving a quadratic equation. I believe we have followed the steps and completing the square. This is just using the main quadratic equation. We solve it to have a quadratic formula, and this will be used in solving many quadratic equations. Thank you very much. I remain Gakpo Fred on Taxonomy Online Mathematics. Thank you.